a notorious crime boss, 3 motherless infants, a crowded diner in downtown Cleveland. When the city's most feared man walked in, the entire room fell silent. But no one expected his 1-year-old triplets to point at the plus-size waitress clearing tables and speak their very first word. "Mom." Delia Marsh adjusted the stiff synthetic strap of her apron, the fabric biting into her waist. She was a big woman, her soft, heavy frame the physical evidence of a year spent surviving grief, the only way she knew how. She carried that weight with a quiet, stubborn dignity, even when the world looked straight through her, or worse, didn't bother hiding its judgment. 14 months ago, her entire life had been torn out from under her. She'd woken in the freezing recovery ward of Mercy General to the news that her premature triplets hadn't survived the emergency delivery. The grief had swallowed her whole, hollowing her out from the inside, and food had become the only thing steady enough to hold on to in a life that had otherwise gone quiet and empty. Now the double shifts at Rosalia's, a cramped Italian place 2 blocks off the river, were the only reason she forced herself out of bed most mornings. The bell above the glass door chimed, sharp against the clatter of silverware and the low hum of the dinner rush. The temperature in the room dropped 10 degrees. Conversation died mid-sentence. Forks lowered slowly to plates. Nikolai Voss had arrived. Nikolai ran the Voss organization, an empire that controlled the shipping lanes from the Great Lakes down through half the Midwest. He was carved out of cold marble and quiet menace, sharp features, a jaw set like a closed door, eyes the color of a storm, still deciding whether to break. His late wife, Katerina, had died 6 months earlier in a car fire that still hadn't stopped raising questions, leaving him the sole guardian of 3 fiercely difficult 1-year-old triplets, Nora, Felix, and Sasha. Flanked by 4 enforcers, Nikolai pushed a custom triple-wide stroller into the center of the restaurant. The manager, a nervous, sweating man named Frank, all but sprinted to seat him in the back booth. In the kitchen, panic spread instantly. None of the other waitresses would go near that table. "You do it, Marsh." Frank shoved a tray of water glasses into Delia's hands, his voice cracking. "Nobody else will go out there. If you upset him, you're fired before you get your apron off. Go." Delia sighed, her knees aching as she pushed through the swinging doors and carried the tray toward the back. She wasn't particularly afraid of Nikolai Voss. When you've already survived the worst thing that can happen to you, terrifying men in expensive suits stop holding much power over you. By the time she reached the table, it was already falling apart. Nora was wailing, hurling her plush rabbit onto the floor. Felix's face had gone a furious, blotchy red. Sasha whimpered, tears sliding down her round cheeks. Nikolai rubbed his temples, exhausted, a rare crack showing in his terrifying composure. His enforcers hovered uselessly nearby, entirely helpless against 3 screaming toddlers. Delia stepped up, bent, and picked the rabbit up off the floor with a surprising, unhurried grace. "Well now," she cooed, her voice warm and low, the same voice she used to hum herself to sleep on her worst nights. "That's an awful lot of noise for such beautiful little ones." The crying stopped. All 3 heads turned toward her at once. Nora's tear-streaked eyes locked onto Delia's face. Felix's screaming died mid-breath. Sasha let out a soft, surprised gasp, reaching both hands out over the edge of the stroller. Nikolai went very still, his enforcers tensed, hands drifting toward their holsters. The triplets rejected everyone. Trained nannies, extended family, every stranger who ever tried. They only ever settled for him. Delia set the rabbit down on the table, suddenly aware of the weight of Nikolai's stare, of her stained uniform, of her own body under his sharp, assessing eyes. I'll just grab your menus, she stammered, stepping back. Nora reached out, her small fingers grasping at nothing, and let out a clear, bright sound that cut through the entire silent corner of the restaurant. Mom! The room stopped breathing. Felix pointed a chubby finger at Delia's chest. Mom! Mom! Sasha giggled, bouncing in her seat, joining the chorus. Mom! Mom! Tomek. Nikolai stood slowly, and the intensity radiating off him was enough to press the air flat against the walls. What did you do? His voice was low gravel, promising ruin. Nothing. Delia stepped back, her heart slamming. I swear, I just picked up the toy. I don't know why they said that. I've never seen your children before in my life. Nikolai's eyes narrowed, scanning every inch of her face. He saw genuine fear. He also saw, staring back at him with sudden and terrible clarity, the exact same shade of hazel that looked up at him from 3 faces every morning. The same curve of the nose. A cold, impossible suspicion began to take root. Reyes, his underboss, stepped out of the shadows instantly. Get her name. Get everything. I want her entire life laid out on my desk within the hour. The heavy doors of Nikolai's private office clicked shut, sealing him in tense silence. He stood at the window, glass of scotch untouched in his hand, staring out at the river without really seeing it. He couldn't stop thinking about the waitress, couldn't erase the image of his untouchable children reaching for a total stranger and claiming her as their own. Reyes stepped in an hour later carrying a thick manila folder. You're not going to like this, boss. Tell me anyway. Delia Marsh, 29, no criminal record, buried under medical debt from her mother's cancer treatment. 14 months ago, she'd been admitted to Mercy General, heavily pregnant. 3 death certificates followed, signed by the hospital's chief of obstetrics, a Dr. Aldrich Voss. I checked the morgue intake logs for that month, Reyes said quietly, watching his boss's face go dark. No infants were ever processed. None. Nikolai's grip on the folder tightened until his knuckles went white. He thought of Katerina, vain, obsessively protective of her figure, who had announced her pregnancy 14 months ago and immediately insisted on a private retreat in Switzerland for her health. Nikolai, buried in a territory war at the time, had let her go. She'd returned 9 months later, slim as ever, presenting him with 3 newborns. She never carried them, Nikolai said, the realization landing like a blow. She bought them. It gets worse. Reyes's jaw was tight. 2 days after Delia Marsh delivered, an offshore account tied to Katerina moved $2 million into Dr. Voss's trust. A cold, silent fury moved through Nikolai's chest. His entire family had been built on the ruin of a grieving stranger. Delia had spent a year mourning children who were alive and sleeping in cribs in his own house. Prepare the car, he said, his voice stripped of all feeling. We're going to Mercy General. 20 minutes later, Nikolai walked into Dr. Voss's private office, locked the door, lowered the blinds, and set a silenced pistol on the desk with a heavy thud. Voss cracked in under 3 minutes. Boo-hoo, she was poor. She was drowning in debt. Voss's voice shook violently. Katerina said she was doing the children a favor, giving them a better life. Nikolai tucked the weapon away. You have 1 hour to leave this city. If my men see your face here again, I won't be nearly this patient. He left the doctor sobbing behind him and got back into the SUV, chest aching in a way he had no name for. Take me to the restaurant, he told his driver. Now. The sky had opened up into a freezing downpour by the time the SUV pulled up behind Rosalia's. Nikolai stepped out, ignoring the rain soaking through his suit. Delia sat on an overturned milk crate by the dumpsters, no longer wearing her apron, her shoulders shaking with silent sobs. Frank had made good on his threat. Nikolai stopped a few feet away, something in his chest twisting at the sight of her. This woman, discarded and humiliated, forced into exhausting labor just to survive her own grief, was the real mother of his children. Delia looked up, terror freezing on her tear-streaked face, as the most feared man in the city stopped in front of her. He didn't yell. He shrugged off his soaked suit jacket and draped it gently over her shivering shoulders. "You're coming with me," he said. "It's time to go home to your children." The drive to the Voss estate passed in heavy silence. Delia sat rigid in the leather seat, Nikolai's jacket still around her shoulders, hope and disbelief warring somewhere behind her ribs. Behind the iron gates, the estate rose out of the rain like a fortress. Stone walls, armed men patrolling the perimeter, a foyer of marble and crystal, utterly alien to a life of cramped apartments and unpaid bills. "Get her dry clothes," Nikolai told his housekeeper, then turned to Delia. "Change. Then come to my study. We have a great deal to discuss." 10 minutes later, dressed in soft, oversized pajamas, Delia sat in a velvet armchair across from the fireplace, while Nikolai laid out the entire conspiracy with methodical precision. Katerina's fear of losing her figure, Dr. Voss's betrayal, the falsified certificates, the truth that the children Delia had mourned for over a year were sleeping upstairs at that very moment. "You went to Voss's clinic for a compensated surrogacy program," Nikolai said, "to pay for your mother's care." Katerina orchestrated the entire process. Reyes found the deeper record, though. She never used a donor egg. She used yours. She wanted the appearance of an heir, not a biological connection. His eyes held hers. "You are their mother. Not a surrogate. Their mother." Delia couldn't breathe. The room tilted. "They're mine," she whispered. "Truly mine. They're yours." She stood without permission, the need to see them overriding every ounce of fear. Nikolai led her up the staircase to the nursery himself. 3 cribs stood in a row. She fell to her knees in front of them, sobbing silently for the lost year, for every stolen milestone. Nora stirred first, pulling herself up on the crib bars, blinking, and her face broke open with recognition the instant she saw Delia. "Mom," she babbled, arms reaching through the slats. Delia scooped her up, pressing her cheek against the baby's warm curls. Felix and Sasha woke seconds later, adding their voices to the chorus, demanding to be held by the woman their instincts already knew. Standing in the doorway, Nikolai watched, something shifting, deep and permanent in his chest. He'd spent years surrounded by cold, calculating women. Katerina had been a viper wrapped in silk. Delia was real, soft, marked by grief, undeniably warm. She was exactly what his broken family needed. "You'll never go back to that diner," he said, stepping into the room, resting a hand on her shoulder. "You'll never worry about a medical bill, or a landlord, or this city's cruelty again. This is your home now. I don't belong in your world, Nikolai. I'm just a waitress. You're the mother of my children." His voice left no room for argument. "And from this moment, you are under my absolute protection." 3 weeks passed, and the transformation inside the Voss estate was nothing short of miraculous. Delia refused to let the staff stay hidden in the walls the way Katerina had kept them. She filled the kitchen with the smell of real cooking, filled the halls with the sound of 3 small children laughing. Nikolai found himself leaving meetings early just to come home. He loved the soft curve of her waist when his hand brushed against it by accident. He loved the flush in her cheeks when he caught her singing to the babies. For the first time in his violent life, he had something close to peace. Peace in his world never lasted. The threat didn't come from a rival organization. It came from inside his own family. Marcus Voss, Nikolai's ambitious cousin, had grown disgusted watching his boss go soft over a waitress with no name in their world. When Marcus learned the truth, that Katerina's pregnancy had been faked, and the woman now living in the mansion was a civilian with no connections, he saw an opening. He planned to eliminate the triplets as illegitimate, kill Nikolai, and take the throne for himself. It happened on a Tuesday night. Nikolai was delayed at the docks. The estate left under the watch of the day shift. Delia was in the nursery, rocking Sasha to sleep, when automatic gunfire tore through the silence downstairs. The alarm system erupted, red strobes flooding the hallways. Reyes burst into the nursery, jacket torn, face grim. Marcus's men breached the perimeter. "We're outnumbered. You need to hide the children, now." Adrenaline flooded Delia's system. She didn't freeze. She grabbed the emergency duffel Nikolai had insisted she keep packed, loaded all 3 crying toddlers inside, and zipped it just enough for them to breathe. Panic rooms in the basement.
"No!"
Delia's voice came out steady and hard.
"They'll know about the panic room."
Nikolai told me. Marcus helped design the security grid. We go up. Roof access. She hauled the bag over her shoulder, her size finally an asset instead of a liability, and moved through the service corridors fast, bursting toward the stairwell, just as Marcus's men kicked in the nursery door behind them. At the steel door to the roof, an enforcer stepped out of the stairwell and raised his weapon at Reyes. Delia didn't hesitate. She threw her full weight into him, like a battering ram, sending him tumbling backward down the concrete stairs. A cold metallic click sounded behind her. She spun to find Marcus Voss standing in the doorway, gun raised, a cruel smile on his face. "Look at you." He looked her up and down with open contempt. Nikolai's new prize, a fat, pathetic waitress, playing queen. Katerina was a monster, but at least she looked the part. His finger tightened on the trigger. "Step aside, and I might let you run." Delia squared her shoulders, blocking the doorway completely, fury burning in place of fear. "You'll have to go through me," her voice carried, low and lethal. "And I promise you, I will drag you to hell with me." Marcus's smile faltered. He raised the gun higher. "Marcus." The word tore out of Nikolai like something that had stopped being human. He stood at the end of the hallway, drenched, flanked by a dozen men, his eyes empty of anything but fury. Marcus barely turned before Nikolai fired once. He dropped instantly. The silence afterward was total. Nikolai crossed the hallway, wrapping Delia in his arms hard enough to crush the breath from her, burying his face against her neck. "I have you," he choked out, the cold in his voice finally shattering. "I have you. You're safe." Delia held on to him, her body finally allowed to shake, the adrenaline draining out and leaving only relief in its place. By morning, the syndicate had been purged of every traitor left standing. But more than his empire, Nikolai had secured his family. In the sunlit dining room, Delia fed Felix a spoon of oatmeal, while Sasha hurled a piece of toast squarely at Nikolai's head. He caught it without looking, eyes locked on Delia, on the soft roll of her stomach against the table edge, the healthy flush in her cheeks, the quiet confidence she carried now that she never had before. She was no longer the broken woman on the overturned milk crate. She was the matriarch of an empire, the fierce protector of 3 children who had never stopped waiting for her. And when Nora pointed a sticky finger across the table and shouted her favorite word, Nikolai understood, finally and completely, that his family was whole. Did Delia's fierce love and unbreakable courage take your breath away? Her journey from a heartbroken waitress to the matriarch of a dangerous empire proves that strength has no size, and a mother's love can outlast anything. If this story moved you, hit that like button, share it with someone who loves an unforgettable romance, and subscribe to the channel for more.